Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between two cameras that are very different, but I believe will appeal to many of the same customers. And that is the Sony CyberShot RX10 Mark III on the left, which retails for $1,500 US, more than many interchangeable lens camera bodies on their own. And then on the right, we have the CyberShot HX90V, which retails for a little less, or I should say a little more than $400 US. Now, the RX10 Mark III is brand new. The HX90V has been on the market for roughly a year. Also, one of the most obvious things, other than the pricing difference that I just mentioned, is the form factor. We have a camera on the left that's as big, if not bigger, than many interchangeable lens cameras with a lens mounted, although none are going to be smaller than the RX10 Mark III when it comes to its 24 to 600 millimeter range that it actually sports with this fantastic piece of Zeiss glass that is fixed to its body. And the HX90V has a 30 times piece of Carl Zeiss glass, not paired up with as large a sensor. It is a sub 1-inch sensor. Here we have Sony's 1-inch sensor that has become the backbone of the RX lineup. Of course, outside of the RX1, RX1R, RX1R Mark II rather. So it's something where basically you're looking at opposite ends of the spectrum, but the type of cameras that appeal to a very similar customer, and that is the person who wants a mega zoom or super zoom. So 25 times lens here, 30 times lens here. But again, key difference being the size of the sensor and overall capability, not just form factor. So let's get right into it. Again, 1,500, a little over 400. You would think there's no reason to compare them. Well, the HX90V, because of that V designation, has GPS geotagging capability so that you actually know where you were when you shot whatever still you're looking at. Something I wish the RX10 Mark III had. Oddly enough, at its price, Sony omitted a GPS feature, which I think would have been a great option. They both have very good EVFs, that is electronic viewfinders, but the one on the RX10 Mark III is, I would say, vastly superior. It's designed for a bridge-style camera and is better than many of the EVFs you'll find on interchangeable lens cameras, and it should be at its price. The one on the HX90V, on the other hand, is the same style as what is found with the RX100 Mark III and IV, which is a pop-out, basically mini OLED EVF, which is definitely better than having nothing in bright light, but still not, I would say, a perfect solution. Whereas what you're getting here on the RX10 Mark III is basically the exact same EVF found on the A6300, but without the 120 frame per second refresh rate. So a very wide, crisp angle, or I should say result coming off of that EVF. Not what you're going to see here, but still very good. Competent is what I would call the EVF on this $428 camera. But again, in terms of optical reach, they're very close. This is a much wider variable aperture lens. Here we're going f2.4 to 4. Here it's much wider, as I mentioned. So again, really not an apples to apples comparison, just like the sensor difference is not an apples to apples comparison. But the optical reach is very close to being identical. The RX10 Mark III is also weather sealed, has a stacked sensor design, raw capability. It's a 20 megapixel sensor. Here we're dealing with an 18.2 megapixel sensor, but that's not what's really important. It's the size of the sensor, and that's where the RX10 Mark III has the clear advantage, beyond just the fact that it has more optical reach as well. 4K video on here, no 4K video here. Here we have 1080p. That's it. I mean, you can take it down from 1080p in XAVC SHD, that's Sony's file container for HD video and for 4K video, but there is no 4K option inside the HX90V. An advantage that the 90V has that the RX10 Mark III does not, besides GPS, is a fully articulating display. And that is because the EVF is concealed, the flash is center mounted. That's not something that we have the luxury of having here on the RX10 Mark III. The screen does swivel and extend out, but of course cannot come all the way around because the EVF is center mounted. No touch screen on either of these cameras. You also have a readout here on the top of the RX10 Mark III, which is another nice added bonus feature, something that most Sony cameras don't have, something that doesn't even exist on something like the A7R Mark II, A7S Mark II, which are, at least right now, Sony's top-of-the-line interchangeable lens mirrorless bodies. Beyond that, the RX10 Mark III, also with that stacked design sensor, has slow-motion video, or HFR, as you can see designated right there. So you can do 240 frames per second slow motion video capture. That does not exist for the HX90V. So that's another benefit specifically of the RX10 Mark III. You can also find that in the RX100 Mark IV as well. And you can set that to 240 and go all the way up to 960 frames. Sony claims at 1080p, but I assure you the degradation that comes with going to that higher frame rate isn't worth it. You're not going to want to use anything beyond 240p. So, that roughly rounds out the key differences, in my opinion. Obviously, again, sensor size goes to the RX10 Mark III, the reach of the lens, how fast that glass is. On the RX10 Mark III, also a major advantage. The fact that this camera is weather sealed, has a microphone input, headphone monitoring jack, tells you everything you need to know about the clear difference between not just form factor, but who Sony is aiming each of these cameras at. But I think they do appeal to similar customers, because anyone who's interested in a camera with a great long lens fixed on a capable or competent sensor is going to have looked at both of these, because that's what both of these cameras really do embody at the end of the day. Of course, a better EVF here. We even have a hot shoe for accessories, a more competent flash, as should be expected. It really just, there's a lot more camera in the RX10 Mark III. In fact, you can make the argument that it's better than many, if not most, interchangeable lens cameras in its price range, in my opinion. Not just from a convenience standpoint, but what it actually produces both in the video and still world. No neutral density filter like days past in the RX10 Mark I and II, but a much longer lens that I would far prefer, even with the variable aperture that they now have as opposed to the fixed one, because the variability of that aperture isn't that wide. F4 is not the end of the world, in my opinion. Whereas, here, low light capability, certainly not going to be a strong suit of the HX90V. And I'm not saying that the RX10 Mark III is a superstar in low light, but it's definitely going to outperform the HX90V easily. But it will not fit in your pocket. The HX90V is one of Sony's smallest point-and-shoot cameras, and yet packs the largest or longest lens in the lineup of CyberShot cameras, other than the HX80, which has no GPS. It is less expensive, basically all the same features. But it doesn't have, of course, nothing in Sony's lineup of RX cameras has anything near what the RX10 Mark III comprises itself of. And right now, the RX10 Mark III is my favorite camera to use. It's just a pleasure, whether it's still, video. I find that it suits every environmental or personal need that I have when it comes to shooting. And even though it's missing those neutral density filters I mentioned before, you of course can attach them and thread them on. So that's really not a game breaker in any way. So two great cameras, two very different cameras, but if you're a fan of Sony, if you're a fan of Carl Zeiss glass, then you're going to have looked at both of these if you are a mega zoom or super zoom, however you want to classify this style of camera, a fan of a long lens being attached, again, to a competent sensor. Both of these are cameras you should be aware of, and that's what today's video is all about. As different as these cameras are, they definitely appeal to the same sort of customer, and that customer knows, and those of you that don't know, I wanted to make it clear what the real difference is between stepping up to a $1,500 1-inch base sensor with a faster, longer piece of glass, weather-sealed body, and more robust feature set, as opposed to a pocketable wonder that shoots incredible 1080p video and solid stills, but isn't going to produce the all-in-one capability for many customers that this camera will. And of course, one is going to, be like lifting weights as opposed to just carrying around a wallet. So that is really something necessary to know beyond just the face value, the retail pricing of each of these cameras respectively. But that pretty much covers everything I wanted to regarding the RX10 Mark III and the pocket-friendly HX90V. Both are great cameras. I wouldn't call them the best complements to one another, simply because if you want long reach, you're going to pick one or the other. You don't need both. I think the RX100 Mark IV is a better complement to the RX10 Mark III, or even my old RX1, which still is a great camera, is a better complement to the RX10 Mark III. And I may even end up doing a video about that somewhere down the road. But that pretty much rounds things out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.